Hello and welcome to the BuildASoil YouTube. Today we have episode 5. Today we're going to go over the transplanting of the autoflowers since they're feminized, which means they're basically going into flower as soon as their timeline allows them. We also don't want to wait too long, so I came in on the weekend. So to Dean, we're trying to get this video done for all of you in a timely manner where we respect the duties of the garden, and you have to do the same thing in your life. What I mean is we could have put this off till next week because I was too busy on Friday and it would have been fine and none of you would have really known. However, secretly behind the scenes I'm wondering, are these autoflowers going to start triggering? Are they getting too root bound? But it's important and I want these to be transplanted. I was waiting for this fourth smaller one that popped a little later to finally be fully erect and to have some turgor, and it's doing that. And I see roots coming out the bottom, which means I know it's really going to survive its transplant well. I didn't want to rush the other 3 and then have this one be stunted. All of them look really good. I'll show you the roots when I pull them, and I'll show setting up the earth box. Before we get started, I'm going to do a quick walkthrough. That's all we're really going to do today. Show you the other seedlings so we get that out of the way. They all look great. Then I'm going to spend the rest of the episode just dedicating to setting up 4 earth boxes, discussing the basic nuances if you're new to this, which we've done many times in past seasons. You can also watch that if you're brand new. Otherwise, it's going to be kind of a revisit of the basics for many of you. However, I'll relay that in another thing that I do in my life, I practice jiu-jitsu, and the best at it can do the fundamentals very well. And if you can win a competition as a black belt with a day 1 fundamental move, I feel like you're really dominating the game as opposed to having to use something that is so new it may be a trick up your sleeve no one's seen yet. And so we want to focus on the fundamental basis that will just build a really good result for you in your garden. So if you're brand new or you're super experienced, this is going to get really good results for you. So let's get started on the walkthrough. This is where we're going to have the 4 earth boxes. You'll notice I have the light angled so that I can walk in here, partially because I made a really stupid placement decision on the fan. I either have to put the light way up or way down, so I may move that, and it's just screwed into the wall through the tent, which is partially why I haven't moved it. But in any case, the light's angled so I can walk in here. When we're done, I'm going to flatten it to about this height. We'll turn the light on after transplant, and I'll keep it low for the first 24 hours and check on them tomorrow when I come back. Make sure they're taking well to their transplant. Quadrant 2, I've got the lights dimmed just a little bit. We're growing the cover crop. You can see my experimental zone where I've kind of roughed up the soil and respread new cover crop seed is working really well. Worms everywhere in here, but it doesn't seem like an excessive amount. A number of you have asked, what do you do? Is it going to be completely taken over with worms? I've found that the way that we do the 10 by 10 and also the way that I do use this in my life is there's typically a little bit of downtime. As much as I'd like to be perfectly consecutive dropping clones in, I usually grow enough where it's not an urgent need. And that means that I have important things to do, but no emergencies. That allows me to have a little bit of dry down period, a little bit of kind of like a season where the soil is not being fully utilized, and it seems like the worm population stays really balanced that way. If on the other hand, you have it always ramped with moisture, it may be that the worms start to overpopulate, but I feel like nature's pretty smart. We're not really feeding it like a worm bin. The plants are taking a lot of the nutrition, and it seems to be able to keep in self-balance for a long period of time. If you look at GLP Nevada, they've got beds on like their 30th cycle. A number of no-till growers like Blue Jay Way, back in the day, Mountain Organics, he's got his own company now. He's done dozens of cycles. I've done over 10 cycles in a bed without having problems, but other people have said, look, this almost turned into straight castings. So I dump it all out, I triple the amount of soil that it makes, and I start over again. So however you do it, just be kind of in tune and trust your gut. I've never had problems with the worms completely taking over and it turning to a worm bin. They kind of stay in an ecosystem there along with everything else that we're doing. Look at the sheen on the new growth. I mean, it's so pretty. It's got nice turgor, like it's proud. And the color's great. It's darker, lighter. You can see all the new growth versus the old growth. I feel like from that visual of all the clover, all of the beans or the peas, they're just so healthy that I know we're going to produce really good results out of these beds of soil. It's kind of an early indication. In fact, if you look over here in quadrant 3, look at this mushroom that popped up this morning and is already drooping. They just finished their life cycle so quickly. Let's see what it looks like. All the way in there. So cool. So these LBMs, or little brown mushrooms, are just popping up in the bed and spreading because, you know, they drop their spores. And if you're wondering if it's going to take over, I've never had one particular mushroom become a problem. Usually when the cover crop's up like this, it creates a nice ecosystem for lots of little mushrooms to pop through. They kind of come and go. I don't see them ever being a problem. Cover crop over here looks beautiful. That's basically it. Let's look at the seedlings. You can take a look at them. I've got them kind of separated. These are the autoflowers that we're gonna transplant today. Those are the Marathon OG. And so this is the Soleil Levant. They're really dry. I can feel the weight right now. So they're ready for water right now. I may even address that before I do the transplanting. Let's take a peek. Look at that, just furry, happy roots. They like the soil, obviously happy with whatever's going on, just ladders, but I wanna make sure that they're not this dry again. The humidity in here is really saving it. The light intensity I have down a little bit, but I wanna get these watered. These feel a little better. This is just bigger, so it's going through its water quicker. When they're in this stage, I wanna encourage you to treat them individually. This one is a little bit heavier. It's not drinking so fast, but this one's really light. So I may not give that one as much water, it just wouldn't need it. So let's do that real quick. So I wanna get some water in here right now. I know that they're happy, but I can feel how light that is and I saw how dry that is, so I'm gonna get it done. And you can also see the Fruit by the Funk, and then we've got the Royal Black Dog Kush down here. And these ones with the fat round leaves are still looking beautiful. I love seeing that. Pretty cool. So we'll see how they pan out. So this is just plain water, okay? Just checking every single one real quick, because some of them might surprise you a little bit. Depends on how much moisture they had initially. And there's no need to overwater them, but here's the thing. It's very easy to overwater when they're a seedling. And this seedling soil holds a lot of water because you want them to germinate. After that, I barely did anything. I didn't give them much water. Once they fully started drinking and they got light for the first time, they're now of a big enough size where I can water it and they're just gonna cycle through the water. It's much harder to overwater at this point. I'm not gonna water these because I want them to transplant. I don't want the soil to stick in the roots and fall apart. I'm gonna leave those as is. All the rest I'm gonna make sure are good real quick. In fact, let's take a look at these roots just for fun before I do it. Oh yeah, beautiful. That's what we wanna see. See how it's not completely root bound yet, but it's getting full? I'm gonna wanna transplant these probably on Monday or Tuesday into their 1 gallons to make sure they don't get too root bound. But really, I'm trying to hold these back just a little bit because I want them to show sex early. Normally it takes 6 to 8 weeks before they show you sex naturally, sometimes 5 weeks. But I'm gonna do that by holding them back a couple days longer than I normally would here, and then putting them into 1 gallons, not quite full of soil, and then topping them off as they go to keep them happy, but hold them back into 1 gallons till it's time. So that's my advice, and we'll show you all along the way as we go. And we determine the sex naturally. We've done that in the first season, and then last season, in season 3, we used the DNA sex testing from Farmer Freeman, which I highly recommend, but you don't wanna always spend that much money across that many seeds, and I think most of our customers are gonna do it this way. So I wanna keep showing the fundamental basics of what it takes to get the job done. So let me finish up so I can get to transplanting. Now they're gonna be good while I do the rest of the transplanting for the autoflowers. Brand new Earthboxes. We're gonna use the Earthboxes that we used for the last cycle in the veggie tent, which we've been neglecting to start, but we wanna make sure that we tend to everything properly. And we don't always have a ton of time, but it will be coming. We've got some breeding to do, lots of stuff, and we wanna make sure that I follow through and plan it accordingly. They come with just a little kit like this, and they come with a tray inside. This is what the bottom of the Earthbox looks like. You can see there's a hole right here, and that's where the water will leak through when you've overfilled it. So that's the overflow reservoir. For the first day, I'm probably just gonna leave the wheels off. I may not actually do wheels in here since there's 4 of them. But at home, it's kind of nice to have the wheels and you can move them around. It's totally up to you, but they're not necessary, so I'm just gonna leave them off for now. I put the tray in, and if you look, these square holes match the square over here where the wicking mechanism is gonna be. Now that we've got that, that's where the roots are gonna grow through. If a little soil falls through, it's not a big deal. We've also got the tube that you need to put in, and we've also got instructions in here. I don't follow the instructions because their instructions are the Earthbox method. We do it the BuildASoil way. So we've got this, which is the mulch cover. There's a white side and a black side. We typically use black side up. Outdoors, sometimes I'll use the white if I'm trying to reflect the sun because I'm doing a late season transplant, knowing that the soil surface could get really hot without the canopy blocking it. So it's up to you how you do things. They even sell a red one for tomatoes, which there's some information about red light reflecting in tomatoes, but I think a lot of that, I just believe a lot of statistics and studies can be manipulated to sell stuff. So, all right, so I've got the tube, and I put that in before I put the soil in. Out of 4 Earthboxes, we did a poll in our Patreon group, and overwhelmingly, people wanted to see 4 different soil recipes. And while I'm all for that, I don't want to confuse tons of people with which one to buy. And we've already done all 4 soil recipes in season 1 in, I think, 10 or 15 gallons in quadrant 3. And so I decided that I wanted to try a new base blend. And the base blend is something that we're offering because you can make your own recipe with it. You can use it in any situation where you can top dress, and it's our most affordable recipe. And I don't want to people to think they have to spend all the money to get really good results, but I also want them to see how powerful the Earthboxes are. So we're gonna put 3.0 and light soil in 2 of the Earthboxes. The other 2 are both gonna be base, so that I can show you how it works in comparison. But the other reason is one of them is a lot smaller. So I'm gonna do 2 in base. I felt like if I did 4 recipes, whichever recipe got this wouldn't quite be as fair. And they're not from clones, so it's not really identical side-by-side testing. But both these will be in base. The other 2 will be in light and 3.0 and Build-A-Flower top dress. And today we're gonna use some Gnarly Barley. I'll explain that as I go. Later on, we're gonna use some Craft Blend, and I'll explain that as I go. Essentially, in an earth box, the reason why it works so well is you've got clean water down below. Below that black screen is gonna be full of water, and it'll go through wet and dry cycles when we fill up the reservoir. That's where the roots are gonna access clean water with no nutrient content at any time they require. But up top, we're gonna have unlimited food, like a buffet. And the feeder roots are gonna realize that, and the plant's gonna put massive amounts of feeder roots up top in the earth box. If you never top dress, you never get feeder roots, which means by the time you top dress, it's too late. There's no roots, they've gotta grow. So I like to stimulate and encourage feeder roots from the beginning in an earth box. Then as you get closer to flower, when you do another top dress, they basically consume it twice as fast as they would if they didn't have roots already there. And because the feeder roots pick up food really well, and because they have water with roots in it that's taking clean water with no nutrients, you can load the top dressing without burning the plant because it can always access clean water. Where when you're in a normal soil system and you've put too hot of soil everywhere in there, it can't escape it. All the water has the nutrients. So the BuildASoil model and the natural model is to put most of the nutrients on top, like in the forest or like in our big beds. It's lower nutrient content down below and a lot more on top, and that biomimicry works well, but it's like hacked and supersized when it comes to the earth box. You can pile the food on and they can drink excessive amounts of clean water, almost like they're growing next to a river or an underground stream. And so that's part of what we're gonna leverage today. So that's everything I wanted to discuss. So I'm gonna grab the base blend and do those 2 first, and then I'm gonna do the 3.0 and light and the others. And I'll make 3.0 the orange because it kind of matches, and the light and the green because it kind of matches. And then these 2, these will be my base blends. So I'll do the first one on camera. We'll probably time lapse the rest, and then I'll get to transplanting the actual plants in there. And then we get to watch. Outdoors at my house, I've got a couple of these. And because it's after hours for me, I literally have not done anything that one top dress and straight water the whole way. And they're some of the most beautiful plants I've ever grown. So I just really like the earth boxes. I did plant late July with those so that they wouldn't overgrow the earth box, and it worked out really well. For whatever it's worth, that might help you. I'm gonna grab the base blend to get started. All right, so I've grabbed the base soil. It's new, it's got a plain label. We're more about what's in the bag than the label, but we'll get there. This recipe we tested at the lab, you can learn about it. I know you just probably want the results from it, but it's very balanced and it's easy to amend. We recommend either adding some Craft Blend or one of your favorite amendment mixes to this, and you can make a really good soil. Instead of us mixing it, I want to show the power of the earth box, where you can have a totally plain soil, put the food on top, and still get the same results as one that is potently already mixed together. Now, at home, I grabbed the 3.0, but I do really like the light and the base because it's balanced, and if you have any different types of seeds, they're all going to do really, really well in it. So take that for what it's worth. All the soils will work well, but we'll show you the difference right here as part of season 4. First thing I do is I pack the wicking corner. So see this has room for the soil. I like to put it directly in there, and I like to pack it down. So you can just kind of overload it. You don't have to be precise and then pack, but I want to make sure that I get directly pressure so that it's going to be a good wick. What I mean is when water rushes underneath here, I don't want it to wash the soil out. And it does have like a plastic fence in there that contains the soil, but I don't want to wash it out. And so a lot of times I'll add a little moisture there first. So that's what I'm going to do and follow my own advice. Really some good pressure on it. Okay, a little bit of water. I've never really had a problem with them washing out, but I do this every time, so I want you to do the same thing, and I think that'll hold it nicely together. I'm only using 1 cubic foot of soil, which is another part of the magic of the earth box. Pretty incredible, really. It acts like you're using 3 or 4 bags of soil with that nutrients on top and water down below. So I'm gonna spread this out, breaking up any clumps. I'm gonna push the soil around to give this some support, pack down behind it. Okay, there's 1 bag of soil in here. Now it's not completely full, but I'm going to add a little bit more by putting the Build-A-Flower in here. You can definitely use like 1 1/4 bags if you want. You don't have to keep it this shallow. I mentioned using 1 bag. This is something you can totally do. You get 1 bag of soil, you put it in here, and then as you go, you can either add more soil or you can start to top dress. But I do want you to take notice that one of the secrets of the Earthboxes, they even mention it here in the directions, is that you can mound things. So right here it says create a mound with the remaining growing media and then put the mulch cover on. So you're kind of covering all of your top dressing. We do that with the Build-A-Flower, and I like to start with potting soil, and then I like to get a pretty big mound going as we go into flower. Since I have this much room, and I'm only having 1 per, I'm gonna add just a little bit more soil to start with. And then as we go, I'm gonna put Build-A-Flower on to start and a whole bunch more later. So that'll kind of give me the best of both worlds in case these really just rage. You can start with 1 bag, it's totally fine. Since I have access to more bags, I'm probably gonna put about 1 1/4 bags in here. I'll open this one right now. And then we'll follow that on all of them. So I'll make sure they're all starting with a pretty similar height. At home, that's normally what I do. It's like 1 1/4 bags and then I top dress from there. It looks a little bit more full, I like it. Any little clumps from the composting and the compost and everything, like you can see my seed, like bacteria and nutrients, and it's like growing so that it'll kind of take little clumps together if the moisture's right. And so I just break those up as I go. It's not imperative, but while I'm here, I like to do it. Also, when the bags are stacked on pallets, they kind of compress and create areas that'll have little chunks just from the pressure. I'm gonna get the other ones done and then we'll come back and do the top dressing, and I like to do the top dressing after I've already transplanted the plant. That way it's on top and I'm not gonna kind of redig the hole. I've got just a little bit of room in here so I can top water in the beginning, and then I'll start mounding as we go later on. For whatever reason, when there's 1 plant, I kind of like to put them to a side, away from the tube. That way it's easy to water the entire time until the plant gets really big and I can always see down it. And then it follows, like the roots grow this way and the plant grows this way. You'll notice that the plants follow where their root supports are. So they'll grow, this shape regardless, of course, and bigger. We'll get to that next. I'm gonna get all 4 together and water them all at one time and then do the transplanting. And then after that, we'll have all 4 here, and then I'll start talking again when I go to mix the water to wet them down and finally put the plants in. I did all of the filling of the Earthboxes, and so now we're ready to get transplanting. And I've got the 2 base blends, and I've got the 3.0 and the light. They all look pretty similar. We use similar ingredients, but way different ratios. The 3.0 has like 2 to 3 times as much stuff in it, different varieties of compost, tons of amendments, extra ones that none of the others have. The light is very balanced, has a good nutrient release, and will work for most of your vegetables and flowering plants, but may need some top dressing. This one could go water only the whole way, but to produce the best results, I like feeder roots on top, and since it's slow release organic, it doesn't hurt anything. Base blend, we're gonna definitely have to top dress so that we never run short. However, all 4 of them are ready to rock right now. We're ready to get transplanting. I wanna get the moisture right, because I don't like to plant into dry soil and then water afterwards and cause all the soil to move around, and I think that makes for a harsher transplant. So I could just add plain water, and it actually looks really pretty when you do it, so I'll do that. But see how you can see all the pumice now? Kind of really shines through when you get it all wet. I love that. Let's get the watering can mixed. So just plain water's in here. And to this, I want to add some of my favorite ingredients so that we transplant really well. You don't need anything. A healthy plant, good soil will definitely be fine for transplant. So if you're wondering if you're missing one of these, you definitely do not have to have them for the Build-A-Soil way. But since we offer these ingredients, a lot of you do have them, I want to show you how to use them. The other thing is we've got autoflowers, and I want to make sure that we do a really good job at transplanting these and give them everything they need to just start ripping out of here, since they're kind of on a timeline we don't have infinity to veg for. They're just going to start triggering into flower on their own. So I'll do the base blend with these, the 3.0 and the light over here like this. And I want to get them wet, so I don't know why I just put the seedlings there. I'll mix all this stuff in, I'll get it all wet, and then I'll put the seedlings there, and then we'll do the transplant. First thing I like to add is the Q-Yaha. I've got the Q20 here. You're gonna see us using that a lot. We have 2 versions. One's 60% saponin, the other's 20. To get it to the 60, you'd have to remove some of the impurities. So the 20 is gonna have some polyphenols, some sugars, a little bit of maybe calcium. And so when you have all of that as well, we're adding more than just the Q. But you'll notice that this is stronger, this one and the other, than almost any wetting agent on the market. That's why we're documenting the saponin percentage. It's also one of the most cost-effective products as far as saponin on the market. So that would be 1.5 teaspoons at most for 3 gallons. There's about 3 gallons in here. 3 gallons will allow me to do 0.75 or 10% to each one of these perfectly. So the Chapin ends up working perfectly for 4 of these earth boxes on the initial watering. So I will go to teaspoons, and I'm gonna go in between the 1 and the 2 there. There we go, in between 1 and 2. And I would encourage you to just underdo it. You don't need to waste the money and all that stuff. It just works so potently well. You don't have to use a lot. So I've got this. Let me keep stacking. So next I would like to do the aloe. And the aloe is just, it's kind of like for humans, it's like a medicinal plant. And so I'm gonna make sure that they have a really easy transplant by having some water solubles and a little bit of the secondary components, the healing properties that the aloe provides. And so in here, this is 1 teaspoon per gallon of water. And so we're gonna go to 3 teaspoons here. You can do half doses on this. Okay, that's about 4.5. I'm erring on the side of too little. I wanna do less is more. Okay, and then last into my water, I'm gonna go ahead and add the Rootwise Microbe Complete. A couple different ways that you can use this. You can actually sprinkle this right into the planting hole. I'm gonna get this all watered in through all of the soil so that the microbes start to work on some of the amendments, and those roots are gonna be there really soon. I'm just gonna add it to my water. You can add it to the planting hole if it's easier, but to me, this is gonna be easier today. So in here, I would add about a tablespoon into 5 gallons of water. So I'm gonna do a half tablespoon, which is about 1.5 teaspoons. Okay, 6 teaspoons of stuff, 3 gallons of water. That's everything that I'm gonna use to water these in. And I think we're gonna get really, really good results. So let me mix this in. Swish it in the water a little bit. Let's see what it looks like just for fun. See all the foam from the Q-Yaha? That's what happens. That foam is gonna make the water kind of like soapy and foamy in there, so it spreads evenly throughout the soil. And there's a lot of other benefits to the saponin, but with dry soil, that's one of the biggest ones. And you can get the width with the wand just right, and then just walk it all the way down. It's pretty cool. Get around the edges. Now, it may look like I just put a lot of water on there, but it's barely in there. So what I'm gonna do is just focus on evenly putting this whole can between all of them. I just want to use this whole can as evenly as possible, eyeballing it. Now I've gone through 2 passes through, watering them approximately evenly. The 3.0 and the light were just slightly drier out of the bag, where the base was a pretty fresh batch and it had some nice moisture in it. So I'm erring on giving these 2 a little bit more of it. And when I get to the bottom, I'm gonna leave just a little bit left. So when I do the transplanting, I can come back and kind of seal the fresh transplant in with the Microbe Complete and the Q-Yaha and make sure that the soil interfaces together and is wet right in that zone. I'm also being cautious not to overwater. I can look and see a little bit of runoff coming to the bottom. So some of it's kind of going through, but weight-wise, they feel like they're pretty good and they could use some more weight. So I don't think it's overwatered. Take notice like that. I also know that I'm pushing closer to the max that I want you to apply. But when you go to look in here right now, like look, wet, wet, dry. So it only has gone a few inches down right now. That's perfect for a transplant. And as it slowly goes in, it's gonna even get wetter down below. But you'll think you put a lot and you'll scratch the surface and it'll only be, you know, ½ inch down. So go ahead and dig around, like make sure everything looks good if you're new to this. Okay, I've got a little left. I'm gonna save that probably 1/4 gallon or so for after I transplant. So I'll set that to the side. I'm gonna grab the 4 plants like I previously discussed. Okay, now where I like to place them, I'll start to show you on, let's say this one right here. I like them over here. You can put them in the center, but if the plant gets big, the leaves are gonna block the tube and then you're gonna have to move the branches out, put your head over it to see down there. I've seen other people put a little float in there, kind of visually display when it goes away from floating that it's too dry. And so there's many ways to do this. You do whatever you like. I just visually look in there and that works well for me. So I'm gonna go over here and dig my transplant hole and I'm gonna get my ingredients that I wanna put in the hole. I've used these in a couple different seasons for transplant purposes. You've heard me talk about chitin before. It's most abundant like in crustacean meal or in ground up insects. It's not as abundant in the frass. Some companies will argue that there's high chitin in their frass and a lot of people purchase it for that reason. I feel it's very misleading. The test that they do on that has to do with the absence of cellulose. Anyways, we can get really deep into it, but there's not very much chitin in frass. There is a lot of chitin in the insect or in the actual crustacean meal. And so we're gonna use insect. This is OptiVeg. It's 8.2% chitin, and that's using a real gas chromatography like an HPLC test, as opposed to using a cellulose minus or a lignin minus. I believe a lignin minus test for chitin is bullshit because they assume that there's no cellulose present and all of what you feed to the worms is cellulose based. So I think this is the superior one. The chitin is helpful because a lot of the fungal properties, like the mycorrhizae is fungus, we want that to develop and they're made from chitin. So we're putting the building blocks for fungus right there. It's also full of amino acids and it also elicits a response from the plant that's like, yo, the chitin might mean there's dead insects, and it kind of toughens up the plant to be prepared for living in the real world where there's insects and other things going on. Plants have their own defense system that they can activate internally because they don't have feet. They can't just get up and run away. They have to stay there and deal with it, and they will get tougher when they are elicited to create a response from its internal DNA, and chitin can help do that. The other thing is we've got the root-wise, that's got the mycorrhizae and a ton of others that create enzymes and fix nitrogen. It replaces 3 or 4 products right in one bag. Secondarily is this Beauveria bassiana, or BB. We've discussed it in the past. It's not a must-have, but it does help with pest control. In other industries, they'll sell it as a pesticide. We offer it just for a natural symbiont. We're more about prevention. There's no pests to kill here, but this is the canidia of the cordyceps mushroom, and there's lots of species, but the Beauveria bassiana that we use, in nature, if an insect runs across it, it can actually grow inside of it and produce a mushroom out of the body of the insect. And that is beneficial for a number of reasons. People use it for root aphids, all these things. We don't have those concerns. I'm adding it because it associates with the plant and it's naturally there on healthy farms, and it creates some really good defenses for the plant as well as nutrients and all those other things. So I'll sprinkle some of this in the hole. The main reason is, I've already told you to do this in the past. Some of you own this and I don't want to forget to mention it. I don't think you need anything. I just want to keep mentioning that. These are extras. I want to talk about how to use it so that those of you that have them can continue to do so. Oftentimes at home, I'll transplant straight, have the root wise in the water, and that's my minimum. I love the root wise. On top of that, these are nice extras. And if you can afford them or if you've got them, go ahead and do it. I'm going to get started right here. I'm going to remove the soil, and it feels nice and moist. In fact, this is a good time to talk about the soil texture real quickly. If you take a clump and you squeeze it and water just pours out, you've overwatered. But see how just one drop kind of beat it up? That's about right. And see how it stays together? That's the ideal moisture. That's perfect. This 0.75 was just right. I didn't quite use all of it, and I'm guessing at the very bottom it's not quite this moist, but for transplant purposes, it's ideal. Later, we're gonna bottom water, so that'll take care of itself. In the beginning, we only top water. I don't want it to be sitting in a pool of water before the roots get going. I've got a planting hole that's the appropriate size. You can put the cup in and make sure. A lot of people do that. In fact, some people will like have their soil moist with the cup there blocking it. Then they pull the cup out and they have an exact size transplant. I just do what I do and it works really well. I'm gonna sprinkle a tiny bit of Beauveria bassiana in there. And it just needs to come in contact with the roots. So not very much. Just sprinkle it loosely in the hole like that. See how it's all over the sides? That'll come into contact with the roots. Same thing here. Instructions on the back say mix a ½ teaspoon of OptiVeg and a ¼ teaspoon of your preferred endomycorrhizal inoculant. Well, that's the root wise. I could sprinkle it in the hole, but we've already watered it right in there. It did say 1 teaspoon, so let's see what this is. Looks like 1 teaspoon is gonna be, like this one's graduated. It's got a few different marks on it. Closer to what looks like a teaspoon to me, and I'm gonna sprinkle it around in there. Usually I just use my hands, but I have the scooper in here, so this is kind of cool. There we go, transplant hole. I like to put my hands just like this. You can see the original seed right there. It's pretty cool how healthy these are. It's beautiful. I like to put my hands over the top, and then I flip it. We already showed you the root system, so we know it looks really good. And I'm gonna go ahead and just drop that in so those roots are right in contact with all the goodies I just put in. Now, instead of dropping fresh soil, I kind of want to push those goodies in. So I'm gonna push from the sides like this, get them right onto the root system. Then that mulch, don't worry about it. You can just cover it up. It'll become part of the soil. Now I like to tamp down just a little bit. There we go. First transplant done. I'm feeling pretty good about that. I'm gonna grab my root-wise water that has the Q and the aloe, and I'm just gonna make sure that I get that kind of glued in there. There we go. I'll do the same to the rest. And then the last what I'll do is come through and show you how to put the plastic cover on there so the soil doesn't dry out. You can use mulch like we do, but these like to be mounded to be super powered, so the plastic mulch works really well. You can always use a little less soil and put the straw mulch in there. You can come take it out as you get closer to flower and then start mounding it up, but I've done both ways. I know I love the look of the straw, but these plastic mulch covers are great for the earth box. I'll show you how to do that last when we're done with all this. I'm just gonna get the rest of these done real quick. Okay, so I've got them transplanted, and now I'd like to start the top dress, which I discussed. You can just put your plastic cover on and be done for now, but I like to get the feeder roots developed. And so I'm gonna grab this first one that I've been demonstrating on, and I'm gonna use some of the Clackamas Gnarly Barley. It's one of my absolute favorite products. It works phenomenal for earth boxes. Craft Blend's really my go-to, but this is sprouted seeds, and some really good sprouted seeds. We've got organic 2-row malted barley, organic sprouted corn, and organic lentils in here. And the lentils are a powerhouse for protein, but really any of the seeds that you use, if they've been sprouted, are full of enzymes. The diversity in there will allow it to break down all the organic matter that we want to be fed to the plant eventually. And so what better product to use than ground up sprouted seeds that have already been dried? You can pre-sprout your own, but the malting companies do a great job at doing it, and then you can grind it up like I did. This comes whole. I just put it in a blender and dumped it back in here. And I'm gonna use 1 scoop. Spread it all across the soil, not right on the stalk, but around. And that's it. That's all I'm going to apply. We'll come back. We're going to use some craft blend later because it really has what they need to go in a flower, but this has so much of everything. It's perfect for setting up the life in the earth box. That was a 1/2 cup scoop. So I'm going to do the same to all of them. But like the rest of this video, I'm just going to do this one first because I've got another ingredient, and then I'll do the rest of them. I'm probably going to do the plastic cover everything right now so I can wrap it up. Let me grab the Build-A-Flower. That's what I'm gonna put on top of here. If you don't have Build-A-Flower is just some compost with a couple of amendments already into it so that it's a little bit like a super fortified compost. My favorite, if I don't have Build-A-Flower, is just some really good worm castings. Maybe you have the Colorado Worm Company castings. Those are as good, if not better, than the Build-A-Flower. They're loaded, so use whatever you'd like. I don't want to pretend like one's better than the other. We just need to get good nutrients and compost up here. And Build-A-Flower is kind of our flagship, so I want to use it. Over the last year, we've updated our recipes to include some of our new mustard and make sure that they're kind of preconditioned, so there's no larva in it. The Build-A-Flower is better than it's ever been. And it's a beautiful black texture because the ollie and the worm castings and all the nutrients that are in it. So let me just start putting this on here. Essentially, I'm just going to try and cover it. I can always mound more later. There's 2 handfuls. I'll do the same number of handfuls per container. 3 handfuls, 4 handfuls. That's enough. I want to have room later when the feeder roots start to develop to keep stacking in here. I probably would like to get some more water and just moisten this down a bit. And I did notice when I was transplanting that the light in the 3.0 bags that I grabbed from in the store were a little bit drier than the base. And when I was transplanting, it could have used just a little bit more water. So I'll probably add a little bit more before I finish this. In fact, I'm gonna do that. All right, so I went and grabbed some more plain water and dumped it in here. These needed just a little more than 10%. I also wanna kind of seal this together. I thought it was a great time. Now, I didn't clean this out, and there's still plenty of foam from the Kuyaha from the last time, so it's kind of like a free extra round. This will make sure that that gnarly barley we just put down has enough moisture to fully activate the enzymes, and then those will start going and breaking down all the nutrients in the compost, and then the feeder roots will be fully wanting to go all that direction to get its nutrients. There we go, looks good. Since I know this could use a little more moisture, I'm gonna add it before I get to top dressing. And I'm gonna do a quarter of what I did the first time, just to be sure I don't overdo it. So if you're wondering, I'm gonna put, less than a quarter gallon in here. All right, that's good. That'll be enough water for me to do the compost on all of them. Let me do the cover now that I've finished this. I'm gonna grab the first cover, show you what it looks like. So when you pop it inside out, they've got a hole to put on the tube. And that way I can pull it across the edge. And then you can kind of pull this and visualize about where you have to cut. So I want to cut a hole pretty close to the end of this plastic so that my plant can go through. And the plant's small, so it's pretty easy. I'm just going to stretch this one a little bit. Be careful not to let go. You can really hurt your seedling right now if it rips backwards. So I'm going to get that over the edge. Pull it. See how it's pulling the seedling a little bit? I kind of was off on the spacing. I want to cut a slit out. And these scissors just aren't very sharp so that it's not pulling on the stalk. There we go. It doesn't matter if it's like perfectly around the stalk, okay? We're just trying to keep the moisture in is all. Looks a little bit bent because I just kind of put some pressure on it while I pulled the plastic over, but I'm gonna kick the light on in a minute. It's got plenty of moisture in there, and these will be happy when we come back to check on them tomorrow. That's what I'm gonna do to the rest of these, and then we'll wrap it up. That's it. 4 Earthboxes, transplanted, dropped the light, turned it on, I've got it on. I'll test the par and talk to you about the environment, all that stuff soon. Really wanted to get those going to keep the autoflowers up and running, even though we started them in a cup. And last time we started right in the Earthbox. It's really nice and moist under here. As you can see, anytime you want on the Earthbox, you just check underneath and see what's going on. We'll be doing that as we go, showing you what the Gnarly Barley looks like and the Build-A-Flower. We're gonna show you what happens. We've got some pollen to collect coming up so that we can make some seeds. We've got transplanting to do and re-amending, so much to cover that we've got to just keep a schedule now. And so for now, for me, it's getting real. And if you've been following along, you planted your own seeds, they start to get big. They start to have needs. They can't just be sitting there for days or weeks at a time. So anyways, if you want to learn more about this, just like our previous 3 seasons, you can watch those, subscribe, like, tell your friends. If you've got any questions about what we did today with the Earthboxes, I know a lot of you use the Earthboxes and really write feedback about how easy they are, how much you like them. But I don't want you guys to think they're just for the beginners. Experts use these and love them too. Let's put the expert questions or things you've noticed. Let's put beginner questions in here. As mentioned before, we're going to go through and do more frequently asked question videos, and this is where we get those from. So please load them up. Other than that, I appreciate you watching along, being here for season 4. If you're in the Patreon group, really appreciate you supporting these videos, helping us to make them to production. And we've got some special stuff in that Discord there, so we'll do a little behind the scenes. Otherwise, appreciate you, and we'll see you guys on the next BuildASoil video.